Hello, everyone, and welcome back to The Way. This week, we're going to be jumping into Chapter 6 of the book, Make Your Bed. And the title of this chapter is called, You've Got to Dare Greatly. And, you know, that's what sports, that's what achievement really comes down to, is who's got the ability to focus, zone in, and put all their chips to the center of the table, believing that this action, this effort is going to lead to the outcome that they want. So hope you guys enjoy this discussion of the book. It was a lot of fun. So if you're just joining in, you can head over to RUDIS.com to catch up on previous episodes and other podcasts, as well as get resources for wrestling technique, coaching interviews, custom wrestling gear, and apparel. And again, that's all at RUDIS.com. In addition to this episode, this week we released an exclusive video from Cary demonstrating his arm drag technique on Instagram. And on Thursday's episode of the RUDIS Wrestling Podcast, Ben and I kind of broke down and gave our top 5 picks for the top 5 regional training centers around the country. We also talked about Ben's upcoming fight at UFC 239 with George Masvidal. We also announced a giveaway for signed posters and some funky t-shirts that will be ending on July 2nd. So to enter for a chance to win some posters and shirts, all you need to do is follow Ben and the RUDIS on Instagram or Twitter and leave a comment on the post, and we will actually be selecting 2 winners from each platform. For those of you interested in new products, we have our new Sly Fox line, including singlets, board shorts, and compression gear, as well as our new RUDIS Essential Tees. Looking ahead to next week, we hope to catch up with Ben one more time before his fight. So we'll probably try and do a podcast at the beginning of next week before he heads out to Vegas. And we'll also be looking at Chapter 7 of The Way. So thanks again for tuning in to The Way. We hope you enjoyed this episode of Make Your Bed, You Must Dare Greatly.
Hey everyone, it's Cary Kolat here with Matt Dernlan in the podcast The Way. Matt, how are you doing, man?
It's going good. Summer's flying by. Geez, it always happens, right? You get done with school, you know, the kids get out of school, and all of a sudden you look like, holy crap, I'm halfway through summer already.
I know.
It's going by. It's flying by.
It's good, man. Well, we're covering the book "Make Your Bed" by Admiral McRaven. He was Navy SEAL for 20-some years, led SEALs. It's a short read and a great book, and just kind of tying it back into what we do as coaches, as athletes, as you know, as a parent. You know, the book's for everybody. And you know, this week we're discussing Chapter 6. You must dare greatly. And I don't know how you felt, Matt, but I really like this chapter, and I really like it because for me this is like a topic I like to talk about. Like I've been in wrestling forever, and you've been in wrestling forever, and you know, the coaches that bother me the most are the ones that say, you know, that's a high risk move. You know, and I hate and I look at wrestling totally different. And I've always looked at it and I was really into technique, and maybe I always say, like, you know, I feel like people love to use the term, you know, God gave him gifts. Well, honestly, I think everybody gets something. You know, I've said this before. Some guys are long and lanky, so they have leverage. Short, stocky guys are more compact, so they're harder to get under. And, you know, I always felt like the thing that I got was I could, like, see technique, and I could drill it a few times. And, like, I always had the nerve or the courage to do it. And, man, I had so many coaches that would frustrate me, especially when I went to college. When I went to college, like, I would score. If somebody shot at my leg, I could score there. And the first thing they tried to do when I got to Penn State was try to put me in a square stance and shut me down and kept saying, Cary, don't give up your leg. It's a dangerous. And I'm like, but I've scored there for years, you know, and I'm good there, you know? And, you know, so this chapter, you know, you must dare greatly. You know, he talks there's a key term, and he talks about, like, hesitation. You know, there's a part where they were going through the obstacle course in Buds, and you have a time, you have a time to make. And he couldn't make the time, and he couldn't make the time because the rope apparently that he had to cross was high up. He probably had a little fear of heights, and he was trying to do the old lay under it and, walk 1 foot over the next and one hand over the next. And to really increase his speed, the best guys would go what they say commando style, and you lay on top of the rope and you drag your feet and you just guide yourself across. And I think there's probably like a fear, you had to get over. And,
because he said there's some things that he had to factor in there, right? He's like, look, one, I'm going straight down. I'm going head first, straight down a 100-foot cord. If I fall, if I get hurt, I'm automatically disqualified. He's like, so there was realities that he was trying to navigate through his mind. Like, hey, if I make a mistake, if I fall, if I slip, if I get hurt, I'm going to get kicked out of Buds, right? And I think that's a natural thing. Like, it's a natural tendency. Like, the coaches, at Penn State, when they were saying, hey, don't give up your leg, all of a sudden that starts jumping in your mind, right? Like, wait, if someone gets on my leg, something bad could happen. Where for years, throughout your career, you've always been comfortable. Like, why would you want to even introduce some doubt into the position I'm so confident in? Right.
And I think this is where, look, the Europeans, and you go back to the Russians. Look, we're an unbelievable international team now, but they still have more titles than everybody, right? The Russians do. And I think this is where their mindset is totally different than ours, and their perspective is different, where they take a kid who has these natural abilities in some areas, and he's good there, and they make it even better. And then they try to take what that guy does and maybe transfer it to somebody else if it makes sense. And this is where we start, getting into the, back when I grew up, where you had these kind of cookie cutter type coaches, square stance, elbows in, head up. I was just covering this one today in practice. I was talking to Dean Heil. Dean Heil's in here working out. And he's like, you think it's okay if I shift my leg and bring it up? I'm like, hell yeah, it is. Like, I'm like, watch those Russians. They shift their lead leg all the time. That was a rule. Did you have that rule growing up? Like, don't ever change your lead?
Yeah.
And I'm like, whoever made that stupid rule? Who said you can't change your lead leg? But that's what I really liked about this. And the truth is, an inside trip is an effective move, because we've seen it be effective. And we've seen it be effective for certain guys, right? Like if you go to 165 pounds with, what's his name from Joseph from Penn State. I mean, how many times did he hit the inside trip in the finals on IMAR?
That's actually a beautiful example, right? Like when those two guys faced each other, those guys lived and died. Like both those guys were great at inside trips, right? And it kind of came down to that scenario when those two guys battled in the NCAA finals. They both dared greatly in those same positions, and that's what I when I looked at that match. Some people look back and say, "Well, Isaiah shouldn't have." He tried to challenge Joseph in his strongest position. Is like, well, he believed it was his strong position too, and he was willing to put it on the line and go after it. That's what I took away, and that's kind of a sidebar. I didn't mean to interrupt you there, but I look back at a situation like that where two guys were both willing to dare greatly in the same situation, knowing that only one guy could come out on top. And, even though, I've gotten to know Isaiah a little bit better now that he's one of our athletes, but that's actually one of those things where I look back and I admire him. Like, no, you were willing to put it on the line in the biggest moment with the biggest title in the college level on the line, knowing that someone was going to lose the position, and he lost it and subsequently kind of lost 2 NCAA titles, but he was still willing to dare greatly, even though it didn't come, out in his favor.
Right. And some of the most entertaining matches that they would say, like the best matches are when both guys think they're going to win. And and back to it, there's no such thing as a bad move when you have put the time into it and put the reps behind it. Then you remove hesitation and you remove doubt from your mind, and then you can go and you can hit something with confidence and not be afraid of it. And I think that's where, like, so if you're a coach listening to this is what I would say. Look, there are some basics. Don't get me wrong. There are fundamental skills that every kid needs to have, right? And even the Russians and the Europeans, they have their fundamental set. But you have to, at some point, recognize when somebody's good. And just because it's high risk for you, I mean, I'll be honest. I tell you, I wasn't out there back arching people. I drilled back arches a lot. One of my freestyle days, but I wasn't out there back arching people. It wasn't position that was good. And I'm not I was 5'4", and most of the people I wrestled. So even when I got them up, like, they were still like flat footed. So it wasn't like I was going to be a tremendous thrower because I didn't have this leverage. So I had to stay in the areas that I could perform in. But there were some things like giving up my legs. Joseph's and Imar's inside trips. These are not high risk situations when you put the time in. And it brings me back that great wrestlers don't hesitate. They, as they would say, they dare greatly, and it's not a risky position when you're fully committed to it and you have the confidence behind it and you got the reps behind it. And that's what I got from this. And it also breaks into, for me, was like the goal setting. Like, there are a lot of people who are afraid to really say, this is what I want, but like really commit to it, right? Like, really jump in there and commit to going for something. And because there's that risk of not getting it, and I don't like to talk about my career. I honestly look, I was committed for 20 some years trying to win an Olympic gold medal or a world gold medal. And I never got it, you know what I mean? And people always ask me, oh, well, how upset are you? I'm like, yeah, I get upset. There's no doubt in my mind that that was the final prize. That was the end. That's what I dared to go after. And in the process of it, it takes 20 some years of your life. And when you don't get it, you feel like, well, it was all wasted. I don't feel like it was wasted. Like there's different paths and different things come out of things. And you don't get, this goes back to the chapter of, hey, life's not fair. You don't get everything you're going to go after. And the hardest working guy doesn't always get it. And you don't like to say those things, but there are. One guy could not be working as hard as you, not put in the same amount of hours, but that day of that tournament, he may be the most focused and the most poised and the most guy, the guy willing to dare and the guy willing to not hesitate and the guy willing to take a risk. And if you have that combination and the timing's right, you could walk out one day the Olympic champ or the NCAA champ. I mean, it literally can happen. And, so that's what I got from this. And it brought me back to cookie cutter coaches as well, Yeah.
Yeah. And I think the one thing I'm going to go back, and you were talking about abilities, and everybody's blessed with differing levels of abilities and different types of abilities. Right. And some guys are taller, some guys are shorter, some guys are stronger, some guys are more flexible. Right. But, the one thing that I would always tell the guys that I was working with, I was like, there's two things that are equal in everybody's eyes and bodies and minds, and that's your effort and your attitude. It's like, you can't necessarily control the level of ability that God has given you, but you definitely can control your effort and your attitude. And if you're controlling your effort and the attitude the right way, you're going to be receptive to the previous chapters that we talked about that set up this one. In the previous chapters, we talked about, chapter 4 was life's not fair, drive on. Chapter 5 was failure can make you stronger. And those failures come when you have the attitude and the effort to put yourself out there day after day, right?
Right.
And when you're applying the right effort and the right attitude in the practice room, putting yourself out there, when it comes to these big moments, when they arise, you have the freedom to try and be great and to do something great. And it's not your and in most of those guys, it's not something unexpected because it's something, the attitude that they've applied every single day. And one of the biggest examples of I have of that in my coaching career was Quentin Wright. I know you're familiar with Quentin. Quentin was a 2-time national champ for Penn State. And this guy, Cary, I love this guy. people sometimes would say about Quentin, he's the worst practice wrestler they've ever seen. And I would argue with that. I'm like, what you're seeing him get his butt kicked in practice every day. What I'm seeing is his preparation to being great when it matters most. Because every day in practice, Cary, he would go out, he would try the stuff that you saw him do in the NCAA finals. He would try these doubles to this body lock, or this, far knee pick, underhook to his far knee pick, and, double to a standing cradle, stuff that you would talk about that anti-cookie cutter wrestler. This guy was the antithesis of what a cookie cutter wrestler doesn't look like. And, so people would say, oh man, he is horrible in practice. Man, he is horrible. I'm like, no, he's great in practice because he's trying to be great. He's putting himself out there and he was preparing himself to be great when the moment arose. And sure enough, the bigger the stage, the bigger the environment, the greater he rose, the greater he was willing to put himself out there. And why he was comfortable doing that, because he did that every single day in practice. And it didn't look pretty in practice. He ended up on his back a lot. He got beat up in practice a lot. But I tell you what, when the light shone the brightest and the stage was the biggest, he had the freedom and the confidence to go out there and be great. And with the knowledge, this will work. This isn't a high risk move because I've tried it a million times. Yeah, maybe 999,000 times I've failed, but it set me up to that one time in that moment where I'm going to succeed at being great, and that's going to help me attain a national title. And I'll give credit to all the coaches around Quentin, and there were some frustrations at times because this didn't just pertain to the practice room. He failed in a lot of matches as well. But there wasn't a time that I can recall where any coach, myself or any of the other coaches surrounding Quentin, ever told him not to do something.
Yeah.
In fact, we actually encouraged him. We were like, no, keep doing it. Keep doing it. Keep doing it. And so he kept doing it and kept doing it. And it just bolstered his confidence to be great in the biggest moments.
Yeah. Yeah. That sounds like a Penn State thing. You know who else really stunk in practice was Troy Sunderland. Troy,
I believe that.
Yeah, Troy, because he coached Quentin. You guys are all up there together, right? Well, Troy, he was just bad in practice, and I remember as a freshman working out with him, and this guy was an NCAA finalist, and I'm like, well, if this guy's an NCAA finalist at 157 pounds, I got a chance of winning in my freshman year, but. Yeah, that's how he was. But man, and then Troy would turn on. People told me that too. They're like, oh, Troy stinks in practice, and but he turned it on and win competition. Well, this brings me back, this chapter is an example in the practice room situation, because if you're good in practice, if you're good in a position, then it's the place you probably don't need to be working. And kids frustrate me when the coach says, okay, we're going to go a match. And if I'm just in practice trying to win matches, if I'm trying to squeak it out against a guy I'm better than, I'm the starter, and, maybe this guy's second or third string, I shouldn't be wrestling in places where I know I can already beat him. And I always use the example, if you've got a weak defense against a high crotch, then you probably should be daring to go into a position where you're letting the guy in so you get time to work. And it's the same if you're good on top. If you're good on top, then maybe you need to be working on the bottom, or maybe you need to be working more on your feet. And if you're good on your feet and not good on top, then I'm taking the guy down and I'm making it a practice thing where I have to have a turn. I have to have a turn. We just did this. We've been doing this, in some of our training situations where we say, okay, and you do this in preseason, sometimes, but we'll say, okay, first to 20 points. But in the course of the 20-point scoring, you must have a high C, you must have a double, you must have a single, you must have a scoring position from an underhook, you must have one spin in there, and you must have one ankle pick. And you have to have 20 points. So what that means is the kid could get, he could get his 20 points with all doubles. But then if he still hasn't hit those other techniques, he has to continue wrestling. And so that you're forcing
good.
them.
That's really, really good. I like that.
Yeah. You're forcing them to wrestle in positions, to look for other things, and they can't quit till they're done. So, and we've had situations where guys are like, I scored my 20, but now I'm actually on point 30 because I still haven't hit an ankle pick. I still haven't set it up. And, and that's you wouldn't necessarily call that daring, but in terms of practice habits, that's where you have to dare. That's where you have to dare, and then that's how it's going to come out in competition. And Quentin Wright, from your story, he was daring. He was daring in there. And then when he came out, when the lights were on, it was ready to go.
And I think this is like, when I look at this chapter, this is the $1 million question, right? Like if you could figure out a way to get every single one of your guys to wrap your mind around this, like, hey, going out there and daring to be great there's freedom in that. There's not fear. There's actually freedom in defeat when you actually go out with that attitude. Not being dumb or being reckless or anything like that. But to your point, when you're daring yourself to put yourself in different situations every single day, there's going to be a level of comfort that builds up. The more comfort that builds up, that develops into confidence. Confidence gives you the freedom to go out and hit it in a match. But, that's one of the biggest things. And that's, I'm sure every coach, or the majority of coaches out there preach this all the time. Like, I'm thinking back the way I used to describe it. And I think I mentioned it here before on one of the shows is, I would encourage guys, I'm like, hey, go make mistakes this way today. Go make mistakes. By that, and I would describe it. I would say, hey, get out of your comfort zone. I was like, one of the biggest pet peeves I always had in coaching, like, when you're catching up with guys after practice, and obviously when you're running practice, you can't watch every guy every single second. So you're like, hey, Cary, how'd practice go today? How'd it go with so-and-so? How'd it go with Joe? That's always a good go. How'd it go? I was like, well, I took him down 6 times to 4. I'm like, stop that. Don't tell me that. Right?
Yeah.
That's not, now you've got that, you've got the scoreboard in your head. You were running the scoreboard in your head, and when you run your scoreboard, you're not trying to get better. And so I was like, that defeats the purpose. I was like, go out and put yourselves in position to make mistakes every single day to develop a sense of confidence. And I think this is probably one of the most applicable things in coaching, because everybody struggles with this. How do I get a kid to the point where he develops the freedom to go out there to try and be great regardless of the circumstance? Understanding like, hey, I think you as a coach would feel the same way. I'm sure you tell your guys all the time, like, hey, I'm never going to be disappointed if the effort's there. If you go out there and put forth the effort, you give the right attitude, I'm never going to begrudge you for that. I'm never going to be upset with you for that. But that's always the trickiest thing, to get these guys to embrace the mentality. Like, greatness can come with defeat, and you don't even realize it. But yeah, this is a really fantastic chapter.
Yeah. Well, I was never afraid of like, I don't know. I never really thought about losing. Like, as a little kid, I know I got upset. I might have got teary-eyed over it a few times, but in big competitions as I got older, I never really thought about it. But I always use this as an example with people. And I wrestled in the U.S. Open mat 13 times, like 13 times. I started wrestling in high school, and I wrestled in that event 13 times, and I actually won it 3 times. So like my average of winning in there is like what? It's like 20, 21 or 23%. Like that's my win ratio at the U.S. Open, right? Like, so I lost in that tournament more than I ever won, but like I kept adjusting, kept making changes. And, I kept going back. I kept going back for more, and I kept daring to do it. And that's what the guys do. I don't think the best guys ever really think about it. We don't take losses as failures. We take it as, okay, I got to change. I got to grow. I got to get better in somewhere. And, with programs and teams, that's what you have to do. You have to keep growing and changing, and your training changes, your recruiting changes. It's constantly improving and making adjustments. And there's always going to be some naysayers who say that's risky, and it's not risky if the time is there and the thought process is there. But, well, I think this was a good chapter, probably one of my favorite chapters, Matt. And I think we go back next week, and what are we on, chapter 7 next week?
Chapter 7, yeah, I think that steps into, and we it's talking about standing up to bullies, and in the chapter, General or Admiral McRaven talks about literally swimming with the sharks.
Yeah, I'll probably say something that ticks some people off on that chapter, because that's an interesting chapter for me. So
for sure.
All right, well, good talk. Again, if you're following along, it's Make Your Bed by Admiral McRaven. And quick read, easy read, pick it up if you want to follow along. And I'll talk to you next week, Matt.
All right, take care, Cary.